In 1796, at the height of the French Revolutionary Wars, a young French general took charge of a ragged, demoralized army in northern Italy. It was his first command. Many expected him to fail. Instead, in just 1 month, he won his first brilliant campaign. With astonishing self-confidence, boldness, and energy, he led his army to victory after victory, transforming the war in Europe, winning praise from a grateful republic, and forging a legend. This is the story of Napoleon Bonaparte's first campaign and the dawn of a new age. 1792, Europe is plunged into conflict by revolution in France. At first it seems this infant republic will be quickly snuffed out by her neighbors. Incredibly, France clings on, thanks to mass mobilization, patriotic fervor, and her traditional military power. In 1795, France occupies the Low Countries, while Russia and Spain withdraw from the war. But the French Republic still faces a powerful coalition of enemies, which includes the Austrian Empire and kingdoms of Piedmont, Sardinia, Naples, and Great Britain, as well as a counter-revolutionary revolt in the Vendée region of western France. In Paris, the most extreme revolutionaries had been toppled, sent to the guillotine, as they had sent so many before them. France is now governed by the Directory, which quickly wins a reputation for corruption and inefficiency. Nevertheless, in 1796 they plan a major military offensive. The two main efforts will be made along the Rhine by powerful armies under General Zordong and General Moreau. A third effort, of which much less is expected, will be made in northern Italy. The French army of Italy is a poor cousin, starved of money and supplies, stripped of troops to reinforce French forces on the Rhine. On March 2, 1796, the Directory appoint a new commander to lead the army. One of France's youngest generals. We're delighted to welcome back as video sponsor Napoleon Souvenirs.com, the online shop for all fans of the Napoleonic era. Since 2010, the team at Napoleon Souvenirs.com has offered the finest quality gifts and souvenirs for all those who adore the Napoleonic era. Their enormous range of gifts includes busts of the Emperor himself, replica Napoleonic firearms, flags, statuettes, imperial eagles and uniforms, and sensational replica swords and sabers, as well as our old favorite, a replica battle of a French marshal. You can visit their online store at napoleonsouvenirs.com, or if you're in Paris, visit the boutique Napoleon in person. Vive l'Empereur, and big thanks to napoleonsouvenirs.com. For sponsoring this video, Napoleon arrives at the Army of Italy's headquarters in Nice on March 25th. He is just 26 years old. 2 years have passed since he masterminded French victory at the Siege of Toulon. Since then, his fortunes have been mixed. A short spell as artillery commander in Italy, 10 days in jail when his political patrons fell from power. He then refused to serve in the Vendée, fighting French counter-revolutionaries leading to several months' unemployment in Paris. Then an extraordinary break. 13 Bondemeyer, Paris. A royalist mob threatens to storm the national government. Napoleon is the closest general to hand and put in charge of its defense. He disperses the crowds with brutal efficiency and is acclaimed savior of the revolution. A grateful directory promotes Napoleon to General of Division and awards him command of the Army of Italy. On March 9th, he marries his great love, Josephine d'Arboyan, and leaves for the front 2 days later. There are French generals in Italy. With a better claim to command than Napoleon. So who a professional soldier who first saw action in the 7 Years' War, a decade before Napoleon was born. Hoshiro, a tough, experienced soldier, bold tactician, and committed Republican. And Massena, risen from the ranks fearless, tireless hero of the Battle of Lodi against the Austrians the year before. All three would later become marshals of Napoleon's empire. For now, Napoleon seems to these veterans young and underqualified, a political appointment, embarrassingly infatuated with his new wife. But there's something about the Corsican, as Massena observed. His small size and puny face did not put him in their favor, but as soon as he donned his general's hat, he seemed to grow by defeat. Napoleon impresses above all with his tireless energy, and he has much to do. His army is organized into Massena's advanced guard of 2 divisions, one led by a hard-fighting Swiss General Lapp, and the other by Menai, whom Napoleon soon decides is incompetent. The main body comprises the divisions of Ozaro, Sahil, and 2 smaller divisions under Macker and Garnier. The cavalry is led by General Stengel, but the Army of Italy has been shockingly neglected by the Directory. The men are hungry and unpaid, with a few units on the verge of mutiny. Some men don't even have shoes or muskets. Napoleon inspects the troops and studies reports. He enforces discipline and breaks up rotten units. He is assisted by his aide Tecumseh, Mount Mole, and the dashing cavalry Colonel Zorshamora. As Emperor Napoleon will make 2 of these men dukes and one a king. His most valuable assistant is his new chief of staff, General Battier, who helps him to reorganize the army's supply system and scour southern France for food, transport, and forage. The situation begins to improve, but Napoleon knows what will really rejuvenate his ragged divisions, victory in battle, and the promise of plunder. Napoleon has spent 2 years studying the situation in northern Italy and the history of past wars here. He has developed clear plans on how the campaign must be fought. Now he will put them into action. Napoleon, with 38,000 troops, outnumbers the Piedmontese and the Austrian army. But if they combine, he will be outnumbered. So he must prevent this at all costs. His plan bears all the hallmarks of what will become known as the Napoleonic art of war. A bold, rapid advance, not against the expected target, Genoa, but Diego. Here he will occupy the central position and prise his enemies apart. He knows that when threatened, the Piedmontese will retreat on their capital Turin. the Austrians on Milan. With his enemies divided, unable to support each other, he can defeat each in detail. Napoleon's plan will be aided by the fragility of the Austro-Piedmontese alliance. They regard each other with deep distrust. After years of rivalry, the new Austrian commander, General Beaulieu, is experienced and was once considered energetic, but he is now 70 years old and does not know Italy. He is convinced the French will target Genoa, the port used by the British to supply their coalition allies, so much so that he rejects Piedmontese plans for close cooperation. Their troops remain scattered across mountain passes in a general defense against invasion. On April 4th, Napoleon moves his headquarters forward to Albanca in preparation for his offensive, but Beaulieu strikes first. On April 10th, Austrian troops take Voltri to disrupt the expected French attack on Genoa. The small French garrison falls back to join Massena's advance guard at Savannah. Beaulieu's fixation with Genoa is playing into Napoleon's hands. Diego, with its vital crossroads that link the Piedmontese and Austrian armies, is covered by just 8,000 men of Argento's corps. Mountainous terrain means Beaulieu can only march to Argento's aid via Acqui, more than 20 miles to the north. What's more, Argento has orders to take French positions at Montenotte as a diversion for the attack at Voltri. But the French cling on courageously. Corporal Roche particularly distinguishes himself, exposing himself to enemy fire to shoot down on the enemy. His commander, Colonel Ranpong, tells his men, "Here we must conquer or die," a moment which quickly enters French military folklore. It's the perfect setup for Napoleon. The enemy's attention is focused on Voltri, and Argento's corps has been left dangerously exposed. He swings into action, sending La Harpe's division to reinforce Ranpong's troops, while Massena makes a tough night march across deep ravines in rain and fog to turn Argento's right flank. By dawn, the Austrians are outnumbered, outflanked, and under heavy attack. They retreat in disarray. Napoleon orders Massena to move on Diego, while he turns his attention to the Piedmontese. But Ojuro's advance gets held up at Costaria. The old castle is held by Piedmontese and Croatian grenadiers. The French launch frontal attacks into withering fire and suffer hundreds of casualties when the colonel of the 18th Demi Brigade is killed. A 26-year-old Louis Gabriel Sauch takes over command. "I have never seen fire like it," wrote Marmot, Napoleon's eighth Vicar. Despite heroic resistance, the hopelessly outnumbered garrison surrenders. The next day, with Sir Hooer's division also advancing from the south, Piedmontese commander General Colley has little choice but to abandon his position at Montezemolo. The same day, under Napoleon's watchful eye, Massena takes Diego, but while Lab's division moves off to reinforce Ozzaro, hungry French troops left in Diego turn to plunder and pillage. No one spots Colonel Vukocevic, a tough Croatian commander approaching with 3,000 reinforcements. He attacks at dawn, routing the French and retaking Diego with ease. It requires the recall of Lap's division. And another day of heavy combat. Before Vukašević can be driven out of Diego, a bayonet charge led by 27-year-old Colonel Land wins particular praise from General Bonaparte. Napoleon has won 3 victories in 4 days. The marches and battles have been grueling, but he has achieved his first objective. The Austrians are regrouping at Acqui and will soon retreat to Alessandria. They can offer no support to the Piedmontese, and so General Colli orders another withdrawal to a strong defensive position behind the Kursalia River. Napoleon orders an immediate attack. Ozzaro's division on the right, Sajo on the left, Messina in support. But the French, under heavy fire, struggled to cross the swollen river with its deep banks. When Sagolia's troops finally get into San Nicole, they immediately begin looting the town and are thrown out by a counterattack. Despite his success, Colli is still heavily outnumbered and fears encirclement. The following evening, he begins a covert withdrawal to Mondovi. But Napoleon is not deceived by the fake campfires. Patrols confirm his suspicions. The Piedmontese are pulling back, though his troops are exhausted. Wet and hungry, he launches them after the fleeing enemy. Colli's troops are caught. Before they can establish a new defensive line, the brave and popular General Decat is killed. Retreat turns to rout. The French enter Mondov in triumph, where at last briefly they can eat and rest. General Colli, his defeated troops scattered and demoralized, requests an armistice. Napoleon declines, as his troops descend from the mountains into the fertile plain of Piedmont. Destitute and starved, French soldiers now plunder the Italian countryside freely. Brigadier General Zubert is among those frustrated by the men's conduct. Everything would go very well if the soldiers did not abandon themselves to pillage. Not a day passes without some looters being shot. Despite this severity, the mania doesn't stop. The rural folk are arming themselves. Napoleon condemns such behavior, but his orders have limited impact, especially as everyone knows Generals Messina and Ozzuro to be 2 of the greatest offenders. On April 25th, French troops enter Carrasco, just 30 miles south of the Piedmontese capital. Turin, meanwhile, General Bollio is at long last marching to Piedmont's aid, but he is a week late, and when he learns that Piedmont has open negotiations with the enemy, he withdraws his troops in disgust, planning to take up new positions along the Po River. Austrian troops join in the plunder of Piedmontese villages as they go. Victor Amadeus, the 3rd king of Piedmont, Sardinia, sees no option but to accept Bonaparte's terms for an armistice. Piedmont must give up the strategic fortresses at Cuneo and either Alessandria or Tortona, leaving the country virtually defenseless. The final peace treaty, signed 3 weeks later in Paris, cedes Nice and Savoie to France and grants free passage to French armies. Napoleon has ended the 4-year war with Piedmont. In less than 3 weeks, the army of Italy has little time to rest on its laurels. For days later, having received 7,000 reinforcements and fresh supplies, it's on the move again. Napoleon plans to invade the rich province of Lombardy, ruled by the Emperor of Austria, and defeat Beaulieu's army. But first he must cross the Po River, which is closely watched by Austrian forces. It will prove one of Napoleon's most brilliant maneuvers. Massena is ordered to make conspicuous preparations to cross the river near Salé, assembling boats and building gun batteries. Meanwhile, Napoleon has formed a new elite brigade, 5,000 grenadiers, Carabiniers and chasseurs to act as the army's advance guard, under the command of General Dall'Armenia. This force is ordered to march rapidly east to Piacenza and cover 40 miles in just 36 hours. They are followed by Larp's division, then Ozaro and the cavalry. Beaulieu receives reports that French troops are moving east and begins to redeploy his forces while remaining conscious that there are still French troops that might cross the Po as far west as Valencia. This uncertainty makes it impossible for him to concentrate his forces. What's more, he's completely underestimated the scale and speed of Napoleon's move. The French advance guard, with Colonel Land in the lead, crosses the Po on May 7th, chasing off Austrian patrols that are the only opposition. By the next morning, most of LAAF Sandoya, Rose divisions, and the cavalry are across, consolidating the French bridgehead, while Messina and Sacquarier move to the crossing as fast as they can. Men of General Lippi's division are the closest Austrian troops. They take up defensive positions at Fombio, but are overwhelmed by the French attack. That evening, Beaulieu's advance guard arrives, expecting to reinforce Lippi. Instead, they blunder into Larp's division. In confused night fighting, General Larp is shot dead, possibly by friendly fire. Napoleon regards him as one of the army's best generals, and his loss a great blow. Beaulieu, realizing that the French have crossed the Po in force and now threaten to cut him off, orders a rapid withdrawal. East Milan is to be sacrificed. The great fortress of Montoire will be his next refuge. The French advance guard is soon in pursuit. On the morning of May 10th, they catch the Austrian rear guard at Lodi. French troops chase the Austrians across town and over the town's 200-yard bridge, over the River Adder. But when they try to follow, they find the bridge is swept by fire from 14 guns. Its far end is held by 3 battalions of Croatian infantry. Several more battalions and cavalry squadrons are behind them in reserve, around 6,500 men in total. Napoleon soon arrives and positions guns to bombard the Austrians on the far bank. An artillery duel rages for much of the afternoon. Napoleon sends Beaumont's cavalry brigade upstream to look for a ford so they can cross the river and flank the Austrian defenses, but he grows impatient. But Senna's division has begun to arrive from the south, bringing his strength up to 15,000 men and 30 guns. Napoleon makes a speech to the infantry, take them, daring them to take the bridge, then orders them forward. The cries of V flower bleak. The hardened 2nd Carabinio Battalion leads the charge. They come under torrential fire from the Austrian guns, but urged on by Napoleon, Bactier, Massanellan, and others. French infantry surge across, under and around the bridge. Faced with this irresistible onslaught, the Austrian front line crumbles, and with French cavalry across the river to the north, the rest of the Austrian rear guard begins an orderly withdrawal. 5 days after his victory at Lodi, Napoleon leads his army into the city of Milan. They are welcomed by cheering crowds, though in reality, Italians are deeply divided in their attitudes towards the French. After Lodi, French soldiers have a new nickname for their general, Lupetti Capital, the Little Corporal. It's a term of affection because he gets his hands dirty, even aiming the guns himself. The job of an artillery corporal. In just a month, Napoleon has transformed a war-weary, disheveled and demoralized army into a victorious fighting force, brimming with esprit de corps and eager for further conquests. While he in his first campaign has demonstrated extraordinary energy, mastery of detail, brilliant military intuition, above all indomitable self-belief. It is this quality that inspires his soldiers to risk their lives for glory, for the Republic, and for the man they will one day acclaim, their emperor. A big thank you to PMF Productions for their help creating this series and charting Napoleon's movements across northern Italy. We highly recommend their YouTube. Thank you also to artist Keith Rocco for kind permission to use his artwork in this series. You can find more of Keith's brilliant Napoleonic